Hey guys, ECRG here. Today we're going to talk about and review the final internal interview I had not too long ago. So that's coming up. Stay tuned. Hey guys, ECRG here. Today we're going to be talking about the final interview I had for the in-house CRA position not too long ago. And so this video is going to be about what it's like to interview for an internal interview. May do another video on that soon. Haven't decided yet. But obviously, this channel is geared more towards clinical research. That's the lens at which we look through everything, because that's the lens that I am in. That's the field that I am in. So obviously, we're going to look through the working world through that view. But a lot of the things I say here are going to apply to every other position when you're applying internally for another position. And we try our best to kind of, I guess you could say, apply it to other positions as well. Well, that's what we do. So thank you guys for listening, and thank you guys for following along. So let's go ahead and get into it. What was it like for my first ever internal interview for a position? Well, it was very nerve-wracking because you don't know what you're going to get. With any interview, you don't know if you're going to get somebody who's very talkative, maybe kind of goes off the cuff a little bit, a lot more playful, or you don't know if you're going to get somebody who's very rigid, has a sheet of questions in front of them, is going to ask those questions and not really deviate too much. And interviewing, so much of the interview is dependent on who you interview with, because you could really vibe with that person and build a common bond immediately, or it could just be a slow, bad interview. They're not really rocking with you, and that's that. I mean, I'm sure we've all had our share of both, and that plays a huge part whether you're going to get the job or not. Sometimes the cards just aren't in your favor, but you got to make the best of them, do the best you can, and that's why interviewing sometimes is a numbers game. Eventually, you're going to get somebody that's really personable and you really vibe with, and they're eventually going to give you the job. So I applied for the in-house CRA position. And actually, if you remember, many, many months ago, probably around the first few weeks of this channel, being when I started uploading these videos, I talked about a meeting with a lady for an informal, informational interview about a position. Well, here it is many months later, the position finally had an opening, and I was able to apply for it and have this internal interview. So that's why we always stress the importance of networking, because we kept that relationship open all the way from those many months ago until now. There has not been a single position open until now, even though I was told that there would have been. So stay patient, guys, stay hungry, and eventually your time will come for you to level up and go ahead and attack the position whenever it's open. So basically, they said I had an interview. I had to submit a questionnaire. They sent out a questionnaire beforehand, about a few days beforehand, asking me some questions like why I wanted to apply for the role, my experience level, detailing some of the studies that I've been on in the past. And a short questionnaire, 2 pages long, not really too in depth. So I had a few people read it, other people in clinical operations, and submitted it back to the recruiter. Then a few days later, the recruiter let me know when the interview was going to be. This happened pretty quickly, all within a matter of a few days. And so then I went in and interviewed for that position. So they obviously probably had read my file that I had sent in, and I don't know what other background information they've done. Obviously, when you do an internal interview, they have your contacts, the people that know you, they have your manager, and they should have a lot more information about you than if you're applying externally. So that can both work to your advantage and disadvantage. But we're not going to talk too much about that here. So in the internal interview, they asked questions that were not extremely detailed. They didn't get into the nitty-gritty clinical research details. They didn't ask about, okay, so if you're doing file reviews and the date is cut off, what do you do? They didn't ask specific things like that, getting into the nitty gritty of the actual job. They asked more behavioral, like, okay, so what happens when you're stressed out? What happens when something doesn't go your way? What happens when a site isn't calling you back? They ask questions sort of like that, just to see how you would react in certain situations, to see if you were a good fit for the job. And so I was prepared for those questions. I mean, I was hopefully as prepared as I could have been for all the questions they would have asked. But, I just pretty much drew on the experience I had in my previous role to answer those questions. And they of course know a little bit about your previous role, because the in-house CRA and my previous role in project management work together in a little bit. And there's a lot of overlap between those two roles. For example, in-house CRAs do a good amount of TMF. And so in my previous role, I did TMF as well. So that was a good talking point to just hammer home that I'm very experienced in TMF. TMF is huge in clinical research because it is one of the most important deliverables to deliver to the sponsor. So pretty much if you talk about TMF and how good you are with TMF, their ears are going to perk up, because the TMF is always in trouble. They always need somebody to review the TMF. And they always, the TMF is never perfect. Always the TMF is never perfect. So always talk about TMF in your clinical research interviews. Bonus tip there. So answer those questions. The interview lasted about an hour. There were two individuals in there. One was the director of the clinical unit I was applying for, and the other one was just a CTL, clinical trial lead. And they both went back and forth and asked me various questions about my resume. They wanted to make sure that my resume added up. They asked me a question that, because I actually had forgotten to review my resume beforehand. But you really shouldn't have to review your resume, because it's your resume. So you should know everything on there without a doubt. And so she asked me, and so sometimes when you do your resume, you put things on there in the language of the job you're applying for. So when she read it back, when she asked me this question about something that was on my resume, it didn't register with me at first what she was asking about. And this was a job that I had had many years ago. This was a research assistant job that they asked about, surprisingly, just to make sure that what I was saying was true. So they asked me a question about it saying in that language, and at first it didn't register. So, as she expounded on it a little bit more, I was like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I was able to answer the question. So that's another tip. Review your resume for sure. And that's a no-brainer right there. I didn't do it, but like I said, if you don't do it, your resume is your resume. So you should be able to speak on that at any given time. So that was really good. And, the interview lasted about an hour. They asked their questions, and then at the end, I was able to ask my questions, and I think it went pretty well. So that's the short overview of the internal, applying internally. Oh yeah, they said they'd get back to me within a week. So they did interview other candidates. I'm not sure how many candidates. I'm not sure if there were external candidates, and I'm not sure what are the departments that other people apply for that position. So that's interesting, to say the least, about that. I felt like I was a good fit for the role. We'll see. So that's pretty much it for this video. We'll do another video on how to ace the internal interview, and that might be the next video actually. So hope you guys will stay tuned for that tomorrow. And if you guys have any questions about the internal interview experience, comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe and become part of the notification squad by hitting that bell. Email us at eliteclinicalgroup@gmail.com. If you'd like to advertise anything clinical research related, we'll read them out, and we'll put them in the description. Email us there at eliteclinicalgroup@gmail.com for more information on that. And we love hearing from you guys. So that's it for today. Take care, guys.